And welcome to a truly ringing edition of Ben's Junk. CRT ringing, that is. And boy, I was not used to hearing that sound anymore. So I guess this is gonna be one of the more mundane Ben's Junks. Perish the thought. But really, there's only so much you can say about a TV. So really, just consider this one of my little rambles. So anyway, I mentioned this already during last week's regular archive episode on the Wheel of Fortune thing. I mentioned there that I picked up 2 CRT TVs in the name of near guaranteeing at least one working tube TV in my possession. The other one being the Insignia that I used in that episode. But had I covered it there, it would have completely derailed that already kind of scattershot episode. So as such, consider this a very, very loose addendum to the Wheel of Fortune episode. But anyway, this is a Toshiba 20AF43, manufactured in 2003. And of course, we all know what the AF stands for, autofocus. So anyway, I was actually a little excited about picking this TV up. Yes, my life is that boring. But I was kind of excited about it because this would be the highest end tube TV I've ever owned by a considerable amount. So, to put this in perspective, this is the first one I've ever owned with stereo sound. So, really aiming high there. But it's also the first one I've ever owned with a component input as opposed to composite. And this is the first one I've ever owned with a non-bulbous tube. So a quasi-flat screen, you might say, but still very much a CRT. And I have indeed tested this out with light guns, so like the Nintendo Zapper, and it works perfectly fine. And it's, as best as I can tell, accurate. I don't have any scientific way of gauging that. But really, the only toy this thing is missing that I would have liked would be an HD tuner for HD TV. But I guess those were still a little rare in 2003. They existed, but they weren't common yet. But they do make converter boxes with component video, and it actually spurred me into fleabaying one of those. It hasn't shown up yet as am I making this. Don't know if I'm going to cover it for a Ben's Junk. Probably not, actually. But at least I have one in the pipeline. So one issue I had with both of the TVs I picked up was that the respective previous owners had just chucked both the TV and the remotes into their respective garages. Well, obviously the TVs survived okay, but the remotes did not. Both had left the batteries in them, and the batteries on both of them had erupted at some point and destroyed not only the contacts, but had gotten down into the remote proper and completely destroyed them. And honestly, I didn't think much of that at the time, but then I learned that I could barely control either TV with just the buttons on the front. So I wound up popping over to Family Dollar and picking up a couple of these cheapy universal remotes, and they only kinda half worked. I mean, I could do the basic functions like changing channels and adjusting the volume, but I couldn't access things like the picture controls, so brightness, tint, sharpness, etc., and I couldn't access the closed captioning, and on and on. So I had to fleabay the original remotes for both of my TVs, and I've also got the Insignia one on hand here. Anyway, just in case you're curious, it was $35 for the TVs, $11 total for the universal remotes, and about $25 total for the fleabayed original remotes. So somewhere north of $70 for items that a lot of people in a lot of places can't seem to give away. But at the same time, Lord knows where we're going to be in another 10 years, so I guess I best not question it. Okay, trying to do a video demo of a TV is a bit of a fool's errand, but I'm a fool, so let's try it. Though, of course, I think this is going to have to be more about functionality than anything else. But anyway, we've got a total of 6 potential inputs here. 1 coax, which we're using right now. It's just my cable box hooked up, and I've got it on the local government access channel. And hey, women in bikinis, only in Sioux Falls. Anyway, aside from that, we've got 3 composite inputs, 1 on the front and 2 in the back. So let's just hit up the first one. And hey, Oddity Archive on my TV? Who'd have thunk it? But I should note that video 1 here also has S-video support, and I'm using it right now. So if you notice in the bottom right corner of the shot, you can see my JVC emblem. I've got my little low-end JVC SVHS ET unit hooked up, largely just for the S-video support. But then, of course, we have a headphone jack. I suppose I should note that. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a component input, which in this case is under the name Color Stream. But there's also a composite output on this TV. So you could send this out to, I guess if you wanted a home theater receiver, or for whatever reason, if you wanted to daisy chain some TVs together. Now, funnily enough, you can swap between standard 4:3 aspect ratio and 16:9 widescreen, but all it does is smash the picture down a bit. So, say what you're already watching is already in widescreen, it's just going to smash it down that much more. So, really the only practical function I can think of for this would be is if maybe by some insane fluke you got something that was supposed to be in widescreen but somehow got vertically stretched. Then I guess it's useful, but that's really the only thing I could think of for it. So I should also note that everything that I've plugged into this acknowledges the correct proper aspect ratios, so it's really a moot point. Now, there are some sound toys here. But of course, they're not going to translate to this video, and I'm not even going to try. So I'm just going to describe them. So let's bring up the menu here. Now, we have this thing called BBE. I don't know what that stands for, and I'm going to have to kind of toggle around because this will only last, I think, 5 seconds otherwise. It just doesn't give you much time. But anyway, no idea what BBE stands for, but it is an EQ setting. And it really cranks the high end, and it seems to cut the low end a bit too. So to the point where it sounds a little brittle to my ears. So I've found that I prefer the heavier bottom end and just the all-around more natural sound of it being off, especially if it's music. Like say I have this on one of the music choice channels. So obviously that's going to stay off. Then we've got one of those pseudo surround settings, and I actually kind of like this one. It's the only one I've ever heard that doesn't have that weird phasey sound. It seems to open up the soundstage, assuming it's already in stereo, just enough. So it gives you more of a perception of space, but yet still sounds normal and natural, if you will, to my ear anyway. And then we've got stable sound, which is a limiter, and it's a pretty gentle limiter. So it's not going to help you a whole lot for the whole quiet show surrounded by loud commercials thing. Especially these days, a lot of commercials are more of a EQ compression thing on the production end of things. But nonetheless, I have found myself okay with it, so I just leave it on. Now, let's just go through some stupid minutia here. So it's got the V chip in it, so you can block out channels. But, of course, in this configuration and these days, it's kind of pointless. It's not going to help you a whole lot. But, yeah, nowadays that you do that through a cable box, I suppose, or maybe a streaming service if you're so inclined. Then, aside from that, this thing has got a, sticking with the whole kids control thing, you can set this to choke the video after a set period of time, so an hour, 2 hours, whatever you deem appropriate, to control your kids' TV intake, to control their video game time, that sort of thing. Now, you can also label channels, but you can only do it on the tuner. It's not going to help me here. I kind of wish I could label the inputs, and I do that on my flat screen. I've got it labeled so it's Blu-ray player, VCR, and so on, so I don't have to try and remember what order I have it hooked up in. And let's see, aside from that, we got a built-in clock. And no, it is not 6:33 in the morning when I'm doing this. I just never set the clock on here. But you can use that in tandem with a timer. And you can set this to turn the TV on and or off at a set time. So you could use it, I guess, as an alarm clock. You know, have it come on at, I don't know, 6 a.m. and wake up to the local news if you're so inclined. But otherwise, really, that's all I can think of offhand. That's got to be all the relevant stuff. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I will talk to you again soon.